Stick around, App State football and more coming up next right here on Sports Bar. Hello, welcome into the Sports Bar. I'm David Jackson. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right to it with two of our regulars, Chris Warner and Travis Stanley. Guys, how are you?
Good. How you doing? Good
weekend of football. You get enough football this weekend?
Yeah.
Got two more games tonight.
Yeah,
so
exactly. It's there never seems to be enough when it finally rolls around. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm still gassed from the drive from Saturday, so I'm trying to recover. Monday Night Football will help. So
yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into some Monday night picks here in a little bit, but let's talk first App State football down at Clemson. We talked about the need last week to capitalize on everything that came Appalachian's way and make no mistakes, and that worked pretty well for 15 minutes, not so much for the final 45.
Yeah, it's hard to overcome, that first interception that Lamb threw down in the end zone. It comes off of right after a screen to Terrence Upshaw that was probably their biggest play in the first quarter at least. And they get down into the into that area, and you can't just throw one up in the end zone like that, especially not to Jaron Kearse, who's a 6'5" NFL-bound safety. He was waiting for it.
Yeah, and this is probably the worst decision-making I've ever seen out of Lamb. Now, granted, there have been games in the past where maybe that guy just doesn't catch that ball, and so the interception isn't made, and you kind of forget about it. But you mentioned the one he threw in the end zone. I would have much rather. I don't know if he had a check down on that play. If he did, hit that guy, or maybe just throw it out of bounds because he didn't have anything. And you throw a jump ball like that, like you say, against a guy that's taller than our guy anyway.
Yeah, on that play, I mean, he even, he kind of evaded some pressure and was rolling out right. Yeah. And honestly, the better decision would have been to tuck the ball and just get outside for as much as you could. I mean, they're an athletic defense, and chances are that's not going to break for very long, but getting to the outside is a lot better than turning over the ball there.
Well, I thought the key point in there was, the athleticism, number one. I think you saw Clemson's defense, and that was certainly a question mark coming into the game, this group is talented, yes, but unproven, certainly. And those guys look like veterans out there in week 2, where I believe it was 9 of the 11 had not played more than 60 career snaps. I mean, they didn't play a lot the week before even. So, you saw Kearse break on that ball. That's one that I'm sure Taylor would like to have back. And then field position allowed the quicksand to just really start enveloping the whole thing offensively. I had the interception down by the goal line. Yeah. That was set up by poor first down management, and that was something that Clemson was able to dictate. I thought Appalachian did a better job at reversing that trend when they reversed the field position. When they finally got themselves out of negative territory, they were able to get a little bit more of that offense moving. And that's one of the downsides to the spread is that in short yardage going in, but in short yardage coming out, your play calling is somewhat limited because of the space. And Taylor was trying to do, I thought, the best he could to manage those situations. But unfortunately, when you're going up against guys that are All-American caliber defensive linemen and a guy like Kearse and their entire secondary for that matter, I mean, those are all NFL prospects. I think you find that level of talent that Clemson have is a little bit better than what Appalachian will see in the Sun Belt.
And I think defensively, I didn't feel like we played bad at all,
especially
early on in that ball game. I think we could have hung a lot better if not for those turnovers. So that defense saw a lot of the field very fast. I mean, you had the one defensive score for Clemson, which that obviously didn't help. But guys like I thought Eric Boggs, Ronald Blair had a great game. John Law. And running the ball, Clemson did not have a ton of success, and at least not right up the middle. They got the edge a few times, but for the most part, I thought that defensive unit played pretty well and have some decent tape going forward, especially a guy like Blair who, if he has that NFL potential, he can look at that tape, he can show that to guys and be like, hey, I did this against Clemson and not Idaho.
Yeah. Neat thing about that, too, is they moved him around some. He played some nose. He played on the opposite side end position and showcased his versatility quite a bit. There were a number of NFL scouts that were in attendance. The blindside sack that he had on Deshaun Watson in the second half was one of the most electrifying hits we've seen out of an Appalachian defender in quite some time. And like you mentioned, he's doing this against proven talent. Mitch Hyatt was a true freshman, but a parade All-American at left tackle. This was his first big test, and Blair just dominated him all day long. So I think Clemson's got to go back to the drawing board from that perspective. So it's good to see some of those situations develop. I thought from a leverage standpoint defensively, outside of the two big pass plays in the second quarter, it did a fairly good job at limiting the big play. Clemson's got one of the most dynamic offenses in the country, and you saw it on display.
Oh, yeah.
But Appalachian, I thought, physically looked the part. I didn't think it was an overmatched standpoint from that aspect. I think it was just game situations. Again, field position, momentum. The interception in the end zone didn't help, and that just kind of got Clemson steamrolling there.
Yeah, and with the injury of Brandon Pinckney, I didn't necessarily know if that was going to really play a huge role. But I felt like they picked on Mondo quite a bit.
They definitely
did. And especially after the Gibbs interception, they kind of tried avoiding him in general, whoever was his cover. And a few of those balls, you think maybe if our defender was a few inches taller, maybe we bat that down instead of just catching it over the top.
He looked kind of scared. I mean, it looked like he had the deer in the headlights moment a few times playing against this level, I guess. I mean, he's had some experience in junior college and is just now getting the opportunity here. But a couple of those balls, he wasn't that far out of position, and all of a sudden he was out of position. And it was really, watching it from up in the box, it was kind of like, what happened? It almost just looked like he got a little, I wouldn't say scared, because I know, these guys are ready to play, but at the same time, he just wasn't ready for that type of athleticism, I think. Yeah. I don't think in the Sun Belt you're going to have many receivers making those plays.
Making those athletic plays.
Exactly.
Yeah, not so much.
And there was no one really running by him necessarily, like you say. He was in position right up until the moment where you need to be in position, and the Clemson wide receiver just made a more athletic play.
Well, hey, so we have a new feature here. We have a new feature. We have new beverage. We have new paper. We have a new feature. And one of those interceptions is our first ever SportsBar play of the day. And as we go to the tape, get a chance to see Latrell Gibbs, a very athletic play in his own right, intercepting Deshaun Watson, a guy that won't be picked off too much this year. But looking back over this, I mean, Latrell, right place, right time, definitely an athletic move here. See a couple of different angles of this. And I thought a guy that has proven over the first couple of weeks with 2 interceptions, he's going to be someone that now teams will scheme away from.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, that was either Watson's first or second pass of the game. It's definitely Clemson's first drive, but I think, was it his first play?
It was one of his first pass attempts, and a real first effort to try to stretch the field here. And just, again, a great breaking on the ball by Latrell Gibbs. And he's a guy, too, that now as teams do scheme away from him, how does that set up the rest of that secondary? I think, you look at the safety positions. Doug Middleton hasn't necessarily been one of those high tackle, high intensity guys, because I think people are going away from him. Well, now if you're trying to stay away from Middleton, you're trying to stay away from Gibbs' side, you're going to have to go at somebody, and will that open up the opportunity for an Alex Gray or for an A.J. Howard or even Mondo to get the opportunity to kind of stick that back in there and say, hey, it's time to go compete and make people have to guard or attack Appalachian a little bit more true.
Yeah, and I think as far as Mondo Williams goes, he's not going to have that poor of a performance again. Playing against the athletes that Clemson has. Clemson as a team, I mean, Satterfield said it after the game. He said, these are some of the most talented, if not the most talented receivers we've ever played against, hands down. And that's a big statement for a team that plays in the Sun Belt. Clemson's redshirting 5-star prospects. And so you have to put that in perspective. Yeah. And when you get into the Sun Belt, there's not as many of those guys, and he'll have a chance to prove himself.
I don't know that I've seen Appalachian play a quarterback that talented before. And that includes Flacco, that includes Byron Leftwich, Jamarcus Russell. Yeah. I mean, Deshaun Watson's the real deal.
Well, I will say just one thing I was glad that didn't happen in this game. It didn't turn into the kind of game like we played against, I think it was Virginia Tech. However many years ago that
Logan
was.
Thomas, yep.
That was discouraging, that game. That's not what I saw out of this team, and I think hopefully that is something you see from the transitional period, from FCS to FBS. We don't have that kind of game. Now, we might get outplayed, and they might be better than us, but we don't have that kind of showing.
Last point on App. What do you feel like you've seen out of these first 2 weeks? What is this team made of?
I mean, aside from the big plays by Clemson in this, and it was really just the second quarter when you look at it, and you can say they brought in their backups and stuff, but like I said, this is a team
didn't really until late in the third. I mean, Watson was out there deep into the third quarter.
Yeah, and so what it really says is this team is they can compete at that level, and I think you look at the first quarter, which is really the defense was on the field for almost 20 minutes in the first half, and so for them to play the way they did in the first quarter after being, getting worn down a bit, I was impressed. I think going into conference play, I know they take on Old Dominion, but when they get into the conference play, they're going to be a formidable defense.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you'll see, like you say, once we get into conference play, a team that is dynamic on both sides of the ball.
Absolutely.
I think we had the talent to be tops defensively in the league. I mean, we were right up there as it was last year, and offensively, I think Lamb will not have a 3-pick. Game the rest of the season. Well, fingers crossed, I guess, but I don't foresee that happening. And I think, we can be very good. It's
such a fine line, too, because, you've got to get, in a game like that, you don't want to be too conservative because you're blowing your chance, basically, right? But on the other hand, you don't want to force the issue. And I think that's where that balance came into play the other day. It was kind of like, do you take the shot? Does a team like Appalachian beat a team like Clemson if you don't take the shot?
Yeah.
But then if you take the shot with what you had in front of you, it's a double-edged sword. You're kind of darned if you do, darned if you don't. But that's, again, why these opportunity games, as you call them, are so intriguing because, sometimes you have to dial up that big chance. And unfortunately, this time it just didn't work out. Looking at the Sun Belt real quick, pretty strong showing by Arkansas State against Missouri. Nearly had that game at home. I think still for my money, Arkansas State might be the most appealing game left on the schedule from a competitiveness standpoint. It's a Thursday night game here in early November. That's going to be a team that's going to be right up toward the top of the standings. They've got a dynamic 1-2 punch QB and running back. That could be one that if you're going to circle one on the calendar that you want to see from a playability standpoint, that to me is the game.
Yeah, and I thought, looking at the Sun Belt, I thought Georgia Southern finally came back and looked like we expected them to look. I mean, playing against West Virginia, same situation as playing against Clemson. They just have the recruiting base there. And so, but this week, their running back came back, had 4 touchdowns. I mean, I think he only had, let's see what I got here. He had 11 carries for 176. It's pretty solid. Yeah. So he's back and ready to go.
And they get the quarterback back this week.
Yeah, they do. And, like you said, you mentioned Arkansas State. I was very happy that they had this kind of performance against Missouri, especially since Arkansas State had this game at home.
Yeah.
When I heard about this game, I was like, wow, I'm surprised they got this game at home. And I was hoping they would have a good showing for the Sun Belt as a conference. Certainly a better showing than they had week 1 against Southern California. They got railroaded by Southern California, and I was a little disheartened by that performance, so I didn't know exactly what we had.
Southern Cal's 2-0 now, and the Sun Belt beat Idaho pretty good the other day.
They are.
We'll have to contend with them apparently.
Plus, Georgia State got their first ever FBS win, knocked off New Mexico State. So
that was a crazy track meet game.
It was. I watched that on a low quality stream on the internet, and
it was like a little black market stream. Maybe a little below
somewhat, but it was a very exciting game, and I was happy to see them finally get a win at the FBS level.
Well, hopefully your video service was a little bit better for the NFL watching yesterday.
It was.
But thought process here globally, if you look across the NFL, if you're a star player for a franchise, you better put some tape around you. You better get some bubble wrap because these guys are dropping like flies. Man, Dez Bryant, Luke Kuechly, the list goes on and on. High quality guys. Seems like too. As the ink dries on their contract, bang, they go down. I mean, the Panthers will find out later this week about Kuechly, but Bryant's out for about 6 weeks maybe. So that will have something to say about how the NFC at least is waged with those two guys adding their name to a healthy list already.
Yeah, I think Dez Bryant's injury is huge considering the Cowboys are, the Eagles and Cowboys are going to be those two teams, I think, in that division. And without Dez Bryant, you've already got rid of DeMarco Murray to a division opponent in the Eagles. It's going to be, without Dez, that offense is going to struggle. You can't just rely on the aging veteran Jason Witten.
Yeah, which, in the case of Dez Bryant, at least it was his foot.
Yes.
The Kuechly injury to me was scary. I was watching that game, and even when he first made the hit, I was like, wow, he looks dizzy. And then he tries to get up, and then he kind of falls back down again. And I was thinking, man, has he hurt his neck? Does he have serious brain trauma? So hopefully this is just a minor concussion, and he can come back. But even if it is a minor concussion, you mentioned the contract he just got. Let's sit this guy. We got the Texans. The Panthers have the Texans next week. I think they can get by the Texans without him without his services, and who knows how long that'll be, that he'll be out. But the guy is certainly worth keeping on the bench until he's fully healthy.
How do the Panthers deal with J.J. Watt? No, that's going to be an interesting matchup. With an offensive line that I mean, they had their moments the other day. I thought that they probably weathered the storm a little better.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's got not quite the pass rush, though, that Houston does. That's going to be an interesting matchup.
Yeah, I would normally say that, J.J. Watt, he's just one man. And normally I would say we can scheme around one man, but I've seen games where him alone, he's changed the whole game.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I don't think anyone really knows how to scheme and game plan for J.J. Watt, even if you have the best tackles in the NFL.
I think J.J. Watt, when you're scheming against him, it's kind of like playing a great quarterback. You're not going to stop them all the time. You're just going to have to live with the fact that you're going to give up plays here and there to him, and you just better hope that they don't go for touchdowns is really what it comes down to. He's going to get some sacks. He's going to be in the backfield a lot. But if you're at least the one thing the Panthers have going for him is a mobile quarterback that can kind of get away from him. He's a very fast guy, but if you're rolling out, Cam Newton's also a pretty fast guy too.
Well, I'm hoping, since we just gave Cam that contract as well, I don't want to see him get smashed by J.J. Watt.
Yeah, no.
I don't want to see him get hit by anyone,
If
but
those
particularly
two run
not
into
J.J.
each
Watt.
other, though, at the same time, I mean, is that like a movable
It rips
force?
a black hole, David. The collision would be so large.
All right, so yesterday we also saw the college all-star game that was Marcus Mariota against Jameis Winston. And it seemed like a throwback game already.
Exactly.
But Jameis had some issues. I think he's going to have some issues with that particular offense. Mariota, on the other hand, was impressive. 42 points in the opener for a team that I don't know. How long did it take them to score 42 points last year? I mean, that's, I guess, why you draft who you draft.
Took a couple games.
It looked like an offense that was a lot more in sync this early than I think people gave them credit for.
Well, I'm concerned for Winston's sake that he already has a Marcus Mariota complex.
Yeah.
I mean, he's only lost, 2 games and however long it's been, both of which to Marcus Mariota, one at the college level, one at the NFL level. But certainly you cannot deny that Mariota had the better showing.
Oh, yeah.
And, if this trend continues, then you have all the people saying, all the Tampa Bay fans saying, wow, we should have took this kid, and that might lead to some firings, at the upper levels there with Tampa Bay.
And I think one thing that has gone under the radar about the whole Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston situation is who's helping Marcus Mariota become an NFL quarterback, and that's Ken Wisenhunt.
Yeah.
He's a great coach, and people talk about he was on Arizona and helped turn around Kurt Warner's career. Right. He knows how to get it done, and he knows how to get production. And Mariota, while he did have question marks as to can he be an NFL quarterback, what the expectation of an NFL quarterback is changing. And he's kind of the new mold, that guy who has the mobility but also can make the mid-range throws. There are very few quarterbacks anymore that really just chuck it deep. I mean, it's just moving on from that, and it helps make up for deficiencies on the offensive line and everything else. And I mean, to see Mariota succeed like that, we're not going to see another 4-touchdown performance next week. I'd be willing to bet on that. But I think he's going to have a very productive rookie year.
Hey, don't cry for Jameis Winston. We were talking about this before the show. The last QB to throw a pick-6 on the first pass attempt of his NFL career, you know who it was?
Oh, I did. I forgot
Brett
already.
Favre.
Yeah, Brett Favre, yeah.
And he ended up in something about Mary. So, I mean, his he ended up pretty
among
good.
other things, yeah.
Speaking of older players now, with Brett Favre, old man Manning, Peyton Manning, you're talking
Father
about the
time.
evolution of the
Yes.
QB. There is no quarterback out there that's come out recently like Peyton Manning. Interesting your take on the fantasy perspective. Do you go after a guy like Manning now because of the age? Is he past fantasy time?
Well, I mean, I watch him play, and a lot of his throws now. He's always been a guy who, he knows obviously all the route tree very well. So he's going to predict that throw. He throws well
for
before
the route tree he put in the ground.
Exactly. I mean, he throws well before that receiver gets out of their break. And normally in the years past, that's the ball's been right there on time. But watching him play the Ravens, even him having that anticipation, some of those balls was still getting there kind of late and allowing that that DB to get that extra hand in there. So from a fantasy perspective, I'm not sure. It might be time to kind of somewhat move away from him. I know a few of the guys that have him in my league are after that underwhelming performance in Week 1, they're not sure if he's their starter. So.
Yeah. The thing about Manning too, though, is I'll say his performance. It's Week 1. He's still gonna put up some numbers. I mean, the years of him breaking, what was it? 2 years ago, he came out and broke the passing touchdown record and everything else. He's a far cry from that now. But at the same time, I also want to give credit to the Baltimore defense, because you're talking about. I know Terrell Suggs got hurt, but Terrell Suggs and Elmas Dumerville is that's quite a pass rushing pair there, and that makes a guy like Manning very uncomfortable.
That Suggs loss is going to be big.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
You look at it's such an interesting contrast where you have Joe Flacco, who's not a young QB by any standard now. Flacco and Manning in that game, Mariota and Winston in the other game. I mean, and kind of going on at the same time. It was really a glimpse into the future, glimpse back into the past with those two particular matchups. Interesting to see too. Kind of final NFL take here. How running back play evolves. This was the first time you saw Carolina without D'Angelo Williams on the roster. They were still able to move the ball somewhat on the ground. They had to get a little bit more creative, I think, in the second half to try to get that thing out. But, you saw Lacey's performance was solid. Jamal Charles was solid again. There doesn't seem to be that next wave of running backs like we see the next wave of quarterbacks right now. Some of these same names are the ones that continue to produce, at least here in the first week of the season.
But, with that being said, I still think the teams that have the best offensive lines are still going to be able to run the ball no matter who is in the backfield. I think in the case of the Carolina Panthers, a back like D'Angelo Williams you mentioned, he was not able to run the ball very effectively toward the end of his Panther career. And I don't know if you guys watched the Steelers' opening game. He was running the ball pretty good.
Yeah.
So,
Lost
that might have been
15 pounds.
exactly.
Too.
And, some of that might have been because those big the big uglies, so to speak, in front of him were doing a little better job blocking for him. So
yeah, he did. He looked like his old self. He really did. I mean, considering going into that game, the Steelers had to be fretting with the loss of not having Le'Veon Bell, and then of course you get the news that Brady is back, and you're thinking, oh great. But D'Angelo Williams really helped them and helped bail them out to an extent, because I really was not impressed by the Steelers' play overall. I mean, they just didn't really show up all around.
Monday Night Football picks. In the spirit of Ashton, this is the chance for us to get ahead of her in the selection. You can't win if you don't pick. She's not here. She can't pick. So we've got to pick some winners here. Otherwise, we don't want to be here next week, all of us over. So Falcons, Eagles. Intriguing matchup for the first Monday night game tonight. What do you guys like?
I think a lot of points will be scored. I think a lot of points will be scored on both sides of the ball, but I can't not pick the Eagles in this matchup. I think Bradford might have a real field day with that Atlanta defense. That was a defense that was just very porous last year, worst in the league in many categories. So I got to go with the Eagles.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Eagles as well. The Falcons have a long way to go. I think getting Dan Quinn to be the coach from Seattle is the right move, and that defense will start to get better, but that does not happen overnight. And Philadelphia is a team that was a quarterback away from being a very, very, very solid team, and I expect them to march up and down the field.
All right, I'm going really scientific here because you guys picked the Eagles. I'm going with the Falcons.
Okay.
Also, because a good friend of mine is an Eagles fan, and I really don't want to have to do that. So I'm going to go after the Falcons there. 1 vote for the Falcons, 2 for the Eagles. All right, Vikings and 49ers. What do you guys have on that?
I got the Vikings, actually, in this one. San Francisco, they've had a tumultuous offseason in many ways, and it's I don't know if they're coming or going sometimes. And I like what Teddy Bridgewater brings to the table. I think he might be one of those, he's one of those young quarterbacks that might take that next step. So I'm going with the Vikings.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Vikings as well. I can't bet against Adrian Peterson. This might be the healthiest he's been in his career, and he's never had a guy as good as Teddy Bridgewater, in my opinion. They're a sleeper team for me for the entire year. So, and couple that with the fact San Fran lost 13 of 27 starters that played more than 6 games last year. Yeah.
All right, I'm going with the 49ers because America loves a dumpster fire when they see one, and this is certainly that. And the 49ers winning this game will then spark a whole week 2 level of, are the 49ers really not as bad as we think? Until they get taken to the shed next week, and then it's, see, they're as bad as we told you they were. So There you go. That's our scientific pick. I've decided that's how I'm going to do this year. No analysis. I'm just going to go with whatever you guys have. I'm picking the exact opposite.
There we go.
So,
gut reaction.
So we'll see how that goes. Real quick hit on tennis. U.S. Open over. The Williams Slam did not occur. We saw Djokovic win yesterday. Is the U.S. Open played at the wrong time of year?
Yeah, it's a bad time to start. Right when the NFL kicks off and college football kicks off, it's not good for their ratings. I don't know whose decision.
Yeah, one of my good friends, he's a huge Ravens fan, that is, and he had to, with the rain delay with the Federer match, he had to choose, and he actually chose tennis. But yeah, it's a bad time.
Been the best thing to happen
Exactly.
to the U.S. Open was the rain delay because it got it out of the East Coast bank of games at least.
That's true.
If you didn't care about what was going on out west, you got that at least. But I don't know. That's for a non-mainstream sport. I think you can call tennis non-mainstream now. Thinking about that window, sure, that's a traditional time, but at least moving the time around, starting it later. You've got lights, play it late.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to compete with football.
All right, so heading into Apps Open Week here, no local football to talk about. Panthers at home, the Texans. Real quick hits on your thoughts on that game. Prediction.
I mean, I didn't think the Texans looked great week one, but I don't think the Panthers are that great either, to be honest. I'm going Texans.
So you're calling for the tie.
Yeah.
13.
It's going to be 6-3.
Well, I agree in many ways. I don't necessarily think either impressed, a whole lot. But being a Panthers homer, I'm picking the Panthers. Let's say 24-20, maybe. It's a close game.
24-20. All right, I'm going to go with the Panthers because why not?
Yeah.
That's I like I like J.J. Watt to have 6 sacks, but Graham Gano to have 12 field goals. His last call here at the Sports Bar. But before we go, we'd like to invite you to contact us at watchapptv.com. Drop us any comments you might have. Until next time, I'm David Jackson. So long, everyone.
Yeah, J.J. Watt.